Are you thinking about starting your own podcast? Don't know where to start? Well, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to start a podcast. Let me tell you about it. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And best of all, it's free. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Just download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hello, Candid Mamas, and welcome. You're listening to the Candid Motherhood podcast with Roxy
and Jackie,
where we tell you all about the ins and outs of motherhood.
We share our own life experiences to prepare you for the good, the bad, and the ugly that comes along with parenting.
So grab your coffee,
sit down,
get comfy,
and enjoy today's episode.
Hi, Candid Mamas. Welcome to Tell All Tuesday. Today, we're going to be talking about a very sensitive topic. We're going to be talking all about domestic violence and abuse within the household towards women and men. On average, nearly 2 people per minute are victims of physical violence by an intimate partner in the United States. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million men and women. Many victims suffer in silence because of fear and embarrassment. They fear retaliation from their partners, and they fear embarrassment by telling others about their situation. You may wonder, why don't the victims just leave their abusers? But it isn't as easy as that. There are many reasons why they can't or won't just leave. Children are affected by the abuse as well. They suffer from mental and emotional disorders. Many of these children will need psychological help. If you are being abused or know anyone who has suffered at the hands of abuse, there are ways to get help. You can go online at thehotline.org or call toll-free 1-800-799-SAFE. You can also download the Aspire News app, which is a discreet app that allows you to receive help at the press of a button and even records your conversation to use in court later. Jackie's going to give you some alarming statistics that revolve around domestic violence.
Okay, so 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence, sexual violence, partner stalking with injury, fearfulness, PTSD, and they contract STIs. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner, slapping, shoving, or pushing. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 25 men have been injured by an intimate partner. 1 in 10 women have been raped by an intimate partner, and the data for men is unavailable for that. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have been victims of severe physical violence, which is beating, burning, strangling, by their intimate partner in their lifetime. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 18 men have been stalked by an intimate partner they believed they'd be harmed or killed. On a typical day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls to domestic violence hotlines. The presence of guns increased the risk of homicide by 500%. Intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all violent crime. And women between the ages of 18 to 24 are most commonly abused by an intimate partner. 11% of domestic violence involves a weapon. Domestic victimization is correlated with a higher rate of depression and suicidal behavior. And only 34% of people who are injured by an intimate partner receive medical care. So there are also 6 different types of abuse. So there's physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal and emotional abuse, mental and physical abuse, financial and economic, and cultural and identity abuse. So we're going to go through each category and just give you some statistics and some information about what types of physical abuse they are and what occurs in the United States. So the first one is rape. So 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men have been raped in their lifetime. 46% of females and 44% of males were raped by an acquaintance. And of those 45% of women and 29% of males, they were raped by an intimate partner, which it seems pretty alarming. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men. You don't really hear about the men a lot, but you hear about the women, you know?
Yeah, that is really alarming. And to think that in a group of 5 women, at least one of them has been abused, like it's really scary to think about.
Yeah. The next form of domestic abuse or violence would be stalking. So 19.3 million women and 5.1 million men in the United States have been stalked in their lifetime. 60% of women and 43% of men were stalked by a current or former intimate partner. That also seems pretty alarming to me. 19 million women and 5 million.
Yeah, I know somebody who got stalked.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, one of my friends, he was like driving by her house at like really late hours, and then he like would slow down, turn off his lights when he would pass in front of her house, and just like be super creepy. And like he would follow her around, and she was like afraid to be alone at sometimes. It was really freaky.
Did she know this person?
Yes, she did. She was actually pregnant with a child, but he was married. She didn't know that he was married. Told her that he was divorced. But after she got pregnant, they had only been together for like 2-3 months. She ended up getting pregnant right away, and it was a mistake, but it turned out to be a little big ordeal. And I don't know, he just became nuts.
That's crazy. I personally have not been stalked ever in my life that I know of.
Yeah, no, I think you would know if you were being stalked.
I mean, like I always say, I watch all these murder shows and stuff, and that's just like creepy when you are being stalked, because like you said, like they could like send you letters, they can follow you home, or just like sit in front of your house, and you know, the list goes on, and you just kind of like, I feel like I would get like a sense that there's somebody always watching me.
Yes, like the paranoia feeling.
Yeah. So the next one would be homicide. A study of intimate partner homicides found that 20% of victims were not the intimate partners themselves, but family, friends, neighbors, persons who intervened, law enforcement responders, or bystanders. And 72% of all murder suicides involve an intimate partner. And 94% of those victims of these murder suicides are female. Which brings me to one of my favorite quotes of the Fatal Vows show, which says, "Love may be blind and marriage bliss, but divorce is murder." So out of those murder suicides, 94% of them are female.
That's crazy.
Very crazy. And you know, like I see it all the time on that Fatal Vows show, and it usually is the husband that kills the wife.
Well, I think that also the reasons is because, you know, men are stronger.
Yeah.
And it's very easy for them to overpower a woman. It's not as easy for a woman to overpower a man.
Right. So another one would be children and domestic violence. So unfortunately, a lot of us have children, and they are involved in your relationship with this person that is the abuser. So 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year, and 90% of these children are eyewitnesses to the violence. That's pretty sad, pretty disturbing. I feel bad for these children because they don't ask to be in that situation. And there's nothing that they can do to get out of it. Unfortunately, they just have to hopefully make it through, you know? So the next one would be economic impact. So victims of intimate partner violence, they lose a total of 80 million days of paid work per year. And the cost of violence exceeds $8.3 billion per year. And 21 to 60% of victims lose their jobs due to reasons stemming from the abuse. Between 2003 and 2008, 142 women were murdered in their workplace by their abuser. 78% of women killed in the workplace during this time frame, which that's pretty crazy too, because how do you get away with killing somebody at your job, you know?
I guess it would depend on, where you work.
And then the last one is the physical and mental impact. So women abused by their intimate partners are more vulnerable to contracting HIV or other STIs. Studies suggest that there is a relationship between intimate partner violence and depression and suicidal behavior. Physical, mental, and sexual and reproductive health effects have been linked with intimate partner violence, including adolescence pregnancy, unintended pregnancy, miscarriage, stillbirth, intrauterine hemorrhaging, nutritional deficiency, abdominal pain, and other gastrointestinal problems, neurological disorders, chronic pains, disabilities, anxiety, and PTSD, as well as hypertension, cancer, cardiovascular disease, and victims of domestic violence are also at higher risk for developing addictions to alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs.
Domestic violence has a lot of effects on the victims and the children of the victims. So we're going to talk a little bit about that right now. Domestic violence, especially when children are involved, plays a tremendous role in their well-being and developmental growth when they witness the event. Children who witness domestic violence in the home often believe that they're to blame and live in a constant state of fear. And they're 15 times more likely to be victims of child abuse. Dysfunctions in a child can include physical, behavioral, emotional, and social areas of their lives, and can be early intervened on if you notice that these things are happening. So symptoms that children might have when they domestic violence can be headaches, stomach aches, irritable and irregular bowel habits, cold sores, problems wetting the bed. They've been associated to have depressive disorders and just like a general complaint of not feeling well. They also may appear nervous and have shorter attention spans, and children may display symptoms of ADHD. And they also, on the contrary, can show symptoms of fatigue and constant tiredness. They may fall asleep in school due to the lack of sleep at home, because a lot of their night might be spent listening or witnessing domestic violence in the home. And children who are victims of domestic violence often are frequently ill and suffer from poor personal hygiene. They also have a tendency to partake in high-risk play activities, self-abuse, and even suicide. So it can affect all ages of from the prenatal to infant, to older children to teenagers, and going into their adulthood.
Now, how do you think it affects them in their adult life? Do you think that they would tend to be more in a abusive relationship?
I would think that, because that's all that they've known their whole lives, so they might think that that's okay if their partner witnesses that or like abuses them.
Yeah. I felt really bad for the kids during the COVID lockdown, because there are kids that are abused at home and their escape is to be at school. So they weren't able to be
Mhm.
in school, and they weren't able to escape that abuse.
I agree 100%. I think there's a statistic, which I know off the top of my head, I'd have to look it up, but that CPS calls went up like a certain amount, certain percentage during COVID lockdowns because of, that exact situation.
Yeah.
They
I
were at
know,
home.
I don't know if this happened last year or like the year or two before, but there was a cop on Long Island that he abused his children, and he left his 7-year-old. It was wintertime. He left the 7-year-old in the garage with no heat,
Mhm.
nothing, no jacket, nothing like that. And he ended up dying in the garage. And I'm pretty sure he was just convicted of murder.
Yeah. Yeah, I do remember that. And it turned out that he was under the watch of CPS, if I'm not mistaken, and that there was a lot of abuse going on. Like they said that they would hide him in a closet
Yeah.
and he was mentally challenged, if I'm not mistaken, called by that. Like, how can you do that to a child nonetheless?
What I was going to say, what disturbed me the most was that the mother, when she had the kids, she obviously didn't abuse them. It was the father that abused them, and they were divorced. And the children would go running to her when she would pick them up, and he would like try to hold them back by squeezing their arm or pinching them, something like that. And she did try to get CPS involved, and CPS either didn't believe her because he was a cop, or it didn't help the situation. And unfortunately, because they didn't do their job, the child is now dead.
Yes, it's a very sad situation.
I feel like this happens more often than we hear about.
If you're abused while you're pregnant, it can have a lot of effects on your baby, even prenatally. So the different effects of abuse can start when you're in a fetus in the mother's womb and can result in low infant birth weights, premature birth, excessive bleeding, and even fetal death. If the mother endures any physical trauma and emotional stress, the increased maternal stress during the times of abuse, especially when combined with smoking or drug abuse, can also lead to premature deliveries and low weight babies. And when a woman is stressed while pregnant, a baby can be born with stress and anxiety and can sometimes even have problems with their growth. So it's really interesting to know that a baby can sense your stress and how it can affect even an unborn child. That's how detrimental this
So,
is. That's
well, if you think about pregnancy, you know, the baby feeds off your energy, the food you eat. If you're a drug addict, they're going to be a drug addict when they're born. A question that I always have though is like, let's say due to domestic violence, there's a homicide and the intimate partner kills their girlfriend or their wife and they're pregnant. Now, are they charged with a double murder or not? Because people say,
it depends on the state. Some states do treat it as a double homicide. Some states will treat it as a manslaughter.
because I personally believe that when you're pregnant, you have a living being inside of you. I don't believe in abortion.
I also think it depends on the fetal age of the baby, how they classify it, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I think after a certain point, and the baby could have been alive if it was born at that time, then it could be a double homicide. But I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm just saying I think that some laws depend on that.
Yeah. Like I know Charles Manson, he killed what's her name? I think her last name was Tate, and she was pregnant. She was 8 months pregnant, but so her and the baby died.
That's really sad. It's always sad when innocent children are victims and they're literally innocent bystanders in all this. It's the saddest part.
That's why I don't agree with the different rules of what term they need to be in to determine whether it's a double homicide or a manslaughter. I believe that once you're pregnant, that's a human being inside of you, no matter if you're 1 day pregnant or if you're 40 weeks pregnant.
I agree. If that's something that's concerning to you, you should start a petition. New York, sign the petition in New York.
Well, I don't support Planned Parenthood, so I always when they're out petitioning, I don't show them love.
Well, I'm not talking about that. You can petition to change the laws. You got to be the change that you want to see happen, Jackie.
Yeah. But like I said, it just blows my mind that, there are states that don't believe that that's a life, and there are people that don't believe that's a life.
It is very sad.
I know this is a topic, but I know that, pretty sure they signed a law or whatever that you're allowed to abort the baby after birth. So you can go to full term, give birth, and then abort the baby.
Yeah, I'm not sure if did it pass in New York or not. I think it did, or they were trying to pass it.
So I'm not 100% sure.
I'm not sure if it was actually passed or not, or if it's something they were trying to have to look into that. Now we're going to talk about babies who actually have already been born. So we're going to talk about infants. Infant children who are present in the home where domestic violence occurs often fall victim to being caught in the crossfire. They may suffer physical injuries from unintentional trauma as their parent is suffering from abuse. They may be inconsolable and irritable, have a lack of responsiveness secondary to lacking the emotional and physical attachment to their mother. And they may suffer from developmental delays and have excessive diarrhea from both trauma and stress. They're most affected by the environment of abuse because their brains haven't fully developed yet.
I wonder also how many of those babies that pass away due to SIDS are due to domestic violence.
That I don't know, but I mean, if they were to die from domestic violence, do you think there would be some kind of physical harm done to their body?
I would think so. Yeah. I mean, unless, like shaken baby syndrome, where you just shake the baby to death.
Yeah, but there would be signs of that. There are ways to tell if a baby has been shaken to death.
Rob, I don't know if he knows them or if it's like somebody online, but I know that they shook their baby and the baby died. And I mean, I don't think it was like a form of abuse. I think it was more of out of frustration. And I don't think he was like convicted of anything. I don't remember exactly though.
Yeah, I have theories about SIDS, but that's for a completely different topic.
Yeah.
The effects on older children witnessing abuse is less evident than behavioral and emotional effect. The trauma that children experience when they witness domestic violence in the home plays a major role in their development and physical well-being. Older children can sometimes turn the stress towards behavioral problems. So sometimes children who witness the abuse will turn to drugs, hoping to take the pain away. They will exhibit physical symptoms associated with the behavior or emotional problems, such as being withdrawn, becoming nonverbal, exhibiting regressed behaviors like being clingy and whiny, and anxiety often accompanies a physical symptom in children who witness domestic violence. If their anxiety progresses to more physical symptoms, they may show signs of tiredness from lack of sleep and weight and nutritional changes from poor eating habits. If you suspect anybody, to be a victim of domestic violence and notice any of these changes in their kids, you want to be on the lookout for physical effects, physical injuries, but mostly you want to take account of like physical changes in like their eating habits, their sleeping patterns, their bowel movements, because those are the type of things that like will be harder to evaluate by a professional. So if you notice those things, then you want to bring that up to a professional. Maybe they'd be able to help them. They're likely to develop behavioral problems like regressing, out of control behavior, imitating others. Children may think that violence is an acceptable behavior of intimate relationships and either become the victim or the abuser in their own relationships. Some warning signs could be bedwetting, nightmares, distrust of adults, acting tough, having problems becoming attached to the other people, and isolating themselves from their close friends and family. They may lie in order to avoid confrontation and excessive attention getting. In addition, the behavioral symptoms of children, adolescents are in jeopardy of academic failure, like dropping out of school and or substance abuse. And their behavior is often guarded and secretive about their family members. They may become embarrassed about their home situation. Adolescents generally don't like to invite their friends over, and they spend their time away from their own home. Denial and aggression are major forms of problem solving with teens. They cope with domestic violence by blaming others, encountering violence in a relationship, or by running away from home. An estimated 1/5 to 1/3 of teenagers subject to viewing domestic violence situation experience teen dating violence regularly, being abused regularly by their partner, verbally, mentally, emotionally, sexually, or physically. And 30 to 50% of dating relationships can exhibit the same cycle of escalating violence in their marital relationships. So that answers our question before
Yeah.
that you asked.
Like the more lower income you are you more susceptible to domestic abuse?
I actually don't think that that's necessarily true. I think that abuse happens in all economic statuses. You don't have to just be poor to experience that. Actually, there's a saying like, I'd rather be poor and happy than rich and miserable, you know? So a lot of things can happen behind closed doors, and money can hide a lot of things.
That's true.
So you just might not hear about it as much. But don't you see all those like celebrities and all these famous rich people, how miserable they are, you know, and their relationships never last. They never stay married it's like a miracle for them to stay married for a whole year.
Yeah. I mean, I think that they have mental issues that come with the price of fame. Because, you know, they always say money doesn't buy happiness, but I always say whoever says that never had enough money.
Or whoever said that's never been poor.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a couple more things. I'm going to go over them a little bit quicker. There can be physical symptoms, emotional symptoms, depression, anger, post-traumatic stress disorder, role reversal, and social symptoms. So real quickly, some of the physical symptoms that they can experience are like 50% of abusers also end up abusing their own children, which is an alarming statistic because
50%?
Yeah. Another alarming statistic is that 25% of the victims of the abusive relationship also tend to get violent with their children. And sometimes when the violence imposed on the children can sometimes be life-threatening. And if a mother is pregnant during the abuse, the unborn child is at risk of lifelong impairments or at risk of life itself. Some of the emotional symptoms, conflicting feelings toward their parents, they distrust. For instance, distrust and affection often coexist for the abuser, and the children becomes overprotective of the victim. So they try to protect like their mother or whatever, whoever's getting abused. They often develop anxiety and fear they may be injured or abandoned, and they fear that their parent will be injured. And they always think that they're to blame for the violence.
Yeah,
so
that's bad.
Grief, shame, and low self-esteem are really common emotions in children that are exposed to domestic violence. And depression is a really common problem for children who experience domestic violence. The child often feels helpless and powerless, and more so girls than boys will internalize their emotions and show signs of depression. Boys are more apt to act out with aggression and hostility. And then some children will act out anger and be really aggressive towards other children. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, can result in children who are exposed to domestic violence. They can come in the form of nightmares, insomnia, anxiety, all that. Sometimes there's a role reversal between the child and the parent's responsibilities because the victim is emotionally and psychological so dysfunctional that the child has to take over the responsibilities for the parent that can't no longer care for themselves.
Yeah, which makes the immediate adult, right? No childhood.
Right. That can have a lot of psychological on the kid. And then we have some social symptoms, including isolation from friends and relatives so that they can stay close to their siblings and the victimized parent, thinking that they can protect them. Or adolescents may display symptoms by joining a gang or becoming involved in a dating relationships that mimic the learned behavior. So they get abused themselves, or men are more likely to abuse women. So if you're a son, you might be more likely to abuse your girlfriend. So you might be wondering, like, why don't women or these victims just leave their abusers? Why don't they just get themselves out of that situation? There's a lot of reasons why somebody can't just up and leave a relationship, or won't just up and leave a relationship. So Jackie is going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so like you said before, like if you have not experienced being in an abusive relationship or domestic violence, you often ask the person, why don't you just leave? But it's more complicated than that. And oftentimes it's dangerous for them to just leave. So these are some reasons why you can't just leave a relationship like that. So number one would be the society normalizes unhealthy behavior. So people may not understand that their relationship is abusive. So when you think that unhealthy or abusive behaviors are normal, it's hard to identify your relationship as abusive, and therefore there's no reason to seek help. So like we were just talking about, if you're a child that grew up in a household of abuse, 50% of those people are going to relay that to their future relationships. So that's like a normal thing to them. They don't know that they're in an abusive relationship or they're being abused.
Also, emotional abuse destroys your self-esteem. So it makes you feel like it's impossible to start again. Oftentimes people in emotionally abusive relationships, they don't understand that they're being abused because there's no violence involved. So they'll dismiss it or downplay the emotional abuse because they don't think it's as bad as the physical abuse. It's hard for those people that are in abusive relationships to leave their partners after they continuously have been made to feel worthless, like there's no better option for them. Like it kind of sort of brainwashes them in a way.
Yeah.
They're constantly being told that they're not good enough and you're worthless and you're never going to amount to nothing. And but you can't believe that because those are all lies.
Well, the abuser is making you feel like you're worthless, so you don't leave, and they can continue that behavior because they have something wrong with them, control issues.
Yeah, and that's probably something I know all too well about.
Yeah. The cycle of abuse. So after every abusive incident comes a makeup honeymoon phase. So often when an abusive situation happens, it's followed by the abuser doing something nice or apologizing and promising that they'll never do it again. So it makes their partner think that their abuse isn't as bad as it really is, which I'm sure that's a huge reason as to why women or men don't leave that abusive relationship.
It's dangerous to leave, like really, really dangerous. A lot of times leaving an abusive relationship is not only emotionally difficult, but it can also be life-threatening. In fact, the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is post-breakup. Women are 70 times more likely to be killed in the weeks after leaving their abusive partner than at any other time during the relationship.
70 times more likely to be killed. That just goes to show you how crazy some of these men are and how controlling they are.
Yes, it's like, if I can't have you, nobody can type of thing.
Right, exactly.
So the best way to protect yourself if you're in an abusive relationship is to create a safety plan. For help creating one, you can check out the My Plan app.
So it's not just hard to break up safely, it's also hard to escape the cycle of control, like we were just talking about, control. People in abusive relationships often attempt to break up with their partner several times before the breakup sticks. On average, a person in an abusive relationship will attempt to leave 7 times before finally leaving for good.
So society perpetuates a ride or die mindset. So those in unhealthy or abusive relationships might just stay with their partner or get back together after a breakup because they feel pressure not to give up, forgive and forget, or ride it out. Pop culture glamorizes being a ride or die for your friends and partner, making people out to be in the wrong for leaving their partner. And while being loyal is a great thing, a good friend or partner would endanger or hurt you.
And they also feel personally responsible for their partner or their behavior. After a conflict, an abuser will turn the situation around and make their partner feel guilty or as though they are somehow at fault. This type of behavior is called gaslighting.
And they believe that if they stick it out, things might change. A lot of people in abusive relationships will stay in them because they love their partners and they think that things will change. They might also believe their partner's behavior is due to tough times or feel as though they can change their partner if they're a better partner themselves. Never stay in a relationship in which you can count on someone to change their behavior for the better.
And there is also a lot of social pressure to be in a perfect relationship. So there's an incredible amount of pressure to be in a perfect relationship, and some cultures and social media only accentuate this pressure, which we've talked about in other shows about Instagram reality versus real reality. So a lot of the times on the internet is not exactly what's happening behind closed doors.
Right. Like when you see there is no perfect relationship. So when you like relationship goals, hashtag relationship goals,
right?
There's a lot that you see before that picture and after that picture is taken.
Exactly.
And a lot of times victims will fear how others will react. So people in abusive relationships often feel embarrassed to admit that their partner is abusive for fear of being judged, blamed, marginalized, pitied, or looked down on.
The last point would be that they share life together. So marriage, children, and shared finances are often huge reasons that people in abusive relationships stay in them. This dependency is heightened in relationships where one partner is differently abled. But there are also similar factors that affect young people's decisions to stay in relationships, including shared friend groups and living situations. So I think that, you know, if you are one of these 20 people per minute that are physically abused, you're not alone. Or, you know, the 1 in 4 women, your group of friends, maybe somebody in there is being physically abused and you don't know about it. You don't have to keep it a secret. You don't have to stay in these relationships. It will be okay. And there are a lot of different methods that you can use, as we spoke about before going to the hotline.org and also calling their 1-800 number, 1-800-799-SAFE. So you can get help without your partner knowing, or that person that is abusing you, and you will be able to get out in a safe way. So again, that is the hotline.org and the phone number is 1-800-799-SAFE. So if you are feeling like you're in an abusive relationship and you're stuck and you don't know what to do, please don't hesitate to go on that website or call that phone number. There is help for you, and you do not need to stay in these types of relationships. And we hope that any of you candid mamas are out there, or dads, that do need this help and you are suffering silently, that you do listen to this and take our advice and our tips and tricks, and also call that phone number. And what was the app that you said earlier?
The Aspire News app.
Okay, so you can also download the Aspire News app, and which will give you access to emergency services immediately, and also can record conversations or abuse that is going on at just the touch of opening an app.
Yeah, and that app is actually really just it shows up as a news app on your phone. So if your partner were to like go through your phone and check your phone, they would never know that that app was made to contact authorities. They can open the app and it looks like a normal news app, but there's one button that you have to press, and that's the one button, and it doesn't look like it would be a button to press to call authorities.
That's very interesting. And I feel like with the technology that we have these days, it makes it easier for these men and women to get out of these abusive relationships.
It is. And I know that it can take a huge mental toll on you too. So it's really helpful to get psychological help after you're out also.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I had a great time talking with you tonight. I hope you guys got something out of this episode, and I can't wait to see you guys again on Friday.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you can see us on YouTube, and follow us at Candid.Motherhood on Instagram and Facebook. Have a good night, Candid Mamas. Thank you so much for listening to Candid Motherhood Podcast.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please subscribe, share, and rate our podcast.
If you have any ideas for future episodes or want to learn more about us, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Candid.Motherhood and on Twitter at @CMotherhood.
We appreciate your love and support. Until next time, thank you, Candid Mamas.